Hey guys, DJ here at Top Deck Cards and Games, and today I'm going to do a deck tech for Force of Will Vlad control. Vlad's a deck that I've talked about before. I really like it, the way it works. It's a hard deck for your opponent to interact with in general, because most things just don't really matter. Your opponent has to do enough damage quickly enough that you can't just use Vlad's ability to gain life out of the situation, and you don't actually have to play any real win conditions in Vlad, because her, again, ability will just win the game by itself. The other big upside I see in Vlad is that the deck's main weakness before was roller-based strategies, and Blazer being so prevalent in the format has kept roller-based strategies kind of on the down low, and it's to a point where I feel very safe entering a tournament with Vlad because there's so much like a Blazer Incarnation and Knights variants, both of which aren't super roller-based strategies. So you're able to play this deck without jamming it full of cards like Meth and Red, or jamming Red in, making yourself weaker to split, so you can play cards like Thunder and Flames of Outer World, because you don't have to play so many cards that deal with rollers anymore. And I think that was just a huge buff to the playability of this deck. So let's just get into the list. First off, we have our Magic Stones. One of the things Vlad used to be able to do is play 12 stones, because when you were 3 colors, you just played the 12 non-basics and hoped you could counter every split. But when you're only playing green-black, as we are here, it's actually much harder to jam all those different stones in, because, like, you know, what are we going to do? We're just going to make our ratios of green and black more wonky, which could work, but I'd rather see my black silences. And I haven't really felt like I need 12 stones to win the game. If Vladmir's were pretty prevalent, I would probably rethink that strategy, but I don't think the place I would go would be more stones. I would just change my deck list. Anyways, so we have 4 Magic Stone Black Silence, the green black stone. Pretty much just a given in here. 1 Gru's Belta. Gru's Ballista is pretty strong in this deck. It's just a non-basic stone that has the ability to kill one of our opponent's creatures. We can use it multiple times in a turn if we kind of tap it in, or before untap, then use it again to kill something up to an X4. And combined with some of the other minus abilities in the deck, you can chip away at some pretty big resonators your opponent might control. We're basically an even split between green and black in our stone base. We have 3 basic green stones and then 2 basic black stones, which, counting the Gru's Ballista, means we have 3 just black sources and 3 just green sources. Vlad herself is 2 mana, deal 200 damage to your opponent, you gain 200 life, and her J-Activate is a black and 2 colorless. She flips over, and when she flips, it enters the field, you destroy a Resonator with cost 3 or less, and you gain life equal to its defense. Then you can banish a Darkness Resonator to give her Imperishable for color, or 2 colorless and a black as well. You're basically never going to flip Vlad. If you do, you're in a very, very bad situation, and it was kind of just a last-ditch effort. Maybe you needed to gain the life off like just something gigantic. And I've had to flip Vlad before. I've won games where I've flipped Vlad before, but very, very few. Largely, if you're in a situation where you go, I need to flip Vlad, you are either too far behind or something wrong has happened. Getting into the deck list, it's fairly straightforward. As I mentioned earlier, this deck's very hard to interact with. So you kind of play on a different axis of everything else, so we don't play any real ways to win the game. We could chip away at our opponent with some of our creatures, and ideally you'll get to, which will speed up your clock a lot and not give your opponent the time to really go over top of you. But because of that, we got to play a deck that's pretty streamlined. We have counter spells, kill spells, and just cards that'll prolong the game. Unfortunately, there's not much good card draw in our color combination, so that was something that was a bit harder to deal with, but we'll make do. Because of this, we do have 4 Familiar of Holy Wind. Familiar of Holy Wind is really great at slowing down aggro decks as well as just getting us deeper into our deck, so it just seemed like a snap 4 of to me in here. Then we have 4 Feasting, Holy Wind Magus or something? Magus of the Holy Wind, close enough. Feasting is, again, just insanely good in these decks. It lets you have more mana, lets you get your mana online quicker. It prevents damage per turn. A lot of times you'll be able to use it as a kill spell that's going to tap for mana later, or play it, make one of your opponent's creatures deal no damage, and then they can't attack with their other creatures because Feasting will just block and kill them. So it can just put your opponent's clock really, really low, provides mana, and if you manage to keep your opponent's board clear, it can just get in for 5, which is extremely strong. We also played 4 copies of Zero, Magus of Null. Zero is just extremely strong. It's a creature that can deal a decent amount of damage to take your clock down. Giving a lot of the Knight Resonators -2/-2 puts them low enough that Zero can just block and kill them. As well as really slowing down like the Incarnate deck, just killing the Rasputins and Rockets. Like, yes, they get value, they just start swimming in, but they've given up the tempo of the turn to do that. So now you have a 0 and they've given up pretty much all of their, not all of their resources, but all of their action for the turn. They've spent their turn, they've cycled their cards, and they have nothing to show for it really on the board. Last for our creatures, we have 2 copies of Carmilla. Carmilla was kind of just a late addition to the deck. I had some slots left open. More removal wasn't exactly what we needed, but more counter spells weren't really helping. The other card I considered for this slot were 2 Nyarlathoteps, which could absolutely be more correct than the Carmillas. Discard's a fine ability to have in this deck. Unfortunately, it's just nearly impossible to incarnate her out, so for 4 mana, Nyarlathotep's not great, but she is good enough. Another thing could be Spiral to Despair, maybe. Maybe that's a card that we should be looking at. But it just seems less good against all the incarnate decks running around, playing like Arthur's and, what's the name of that card now? Death Scythe, to just discard for their costs. So it seems kind of, whatever. You have some flex slots here. You could play Meph if you're the kind of person who wants to play a win condition. I am not. But Carmilla is definitely a strong card. She gets good value, comes down, kills a creature, is an 8/8, which means your opponent will probably be forced to either trade with her in combat or play a removal spell on her. Either one of those is fine with me. If she's trading 2 for 1 and taking tempo away from my opponent, that's great. And if she kills their creatures in 6 and play to deal 800, that's a lot of time that is off my clock as far as having to drain my opponent out. Next, we have 4 copies of Artemis, the God's Bow. Artemis is just extremely strong at slowing the game down, keeping our opponent's creatures off the table, and forcing them into awkward combat situations, which again is just what our deck wants to do. And being able to do it without the cost of mana is great. Then we have 4 copies of Zeke's Ancient Magic. Zeke's countering creatures is much better than countering non-creature spells right now. The only non-creature spell that's really seemed necessary to counter a lot of the time is Split Heaven and Earth. We do play plenty of, just cancel a spell cards in here too, but Split Heaven and Earth is the biggest enemy to this deck as far as regular spells go. So, outside of that, we really need to just counter creatures. So countering your opponent's Nyarlathoteps on like turn 2 and 3 is extremely key. Countering their Lancelots on turn 2 is extremely key. Basically, you just want to use this card to keep your opponent's tempo as low as possible, and counter cards that are difficult to deal with removal. In general, if you look at your hand and go, well, I could just play a kill spell, it's best to save Zeke's, because Zeke's can protect your creatures if you need them to deal damage to close the game out. Zeke's can pump your creatures if you need them to close the game out, and Zeke's can deal with creatures that you can't play removal on. So, if your opponent plays Meph, you look at your hand and go, well, Zeke's is going to answer that better than the Stoning Death, because I won't take 500. If your opponent plays, a Lancelot and you could just Stoning it or Dark Purge it or something, you play the removal spell. It's pretty key to know which cards need Zeke's and which cards you just want to play a kill spell on. As we mentioned, we do have enough ways to counter just Split Heaven and Earth. We play 3 copies of Keen Sense, which has the upside of making our Rezzard matchup much better by killing their stealth cards. Not a super relevant upside, but it is upside, and you'd be very foolish to not take advantage in the Rezzard matchup. Other cards that really need countered, the deck I did before was what's the name of that deck? Jeez. Oh, the Yamada combo deck. You really need to counter their reanimate spells. Sometimes countering Regalia is worth it for the 2 mana. Like if your opponent tries to slow roll their Leviathan or something to try to wombo you out in a ruler-based strategy, you can counter Leviathan or something with this. So that is a lot of power. We also have 2 copies of Exceed, kind of just cover our bases as well as Cantrip. So Zeke's is really powerful in this deck, and honestly, 3 mana Zeke's was a card that I would still play. Like if I could play 8 copies of Zeke's and just have them be 3 mana, I would probably play it just because of the upside the card has. That's probably a lie, but it is extremely good, and I basically just play Exceed, honestly, as Zeke's 5 and 6, just to counter creature spells. The upsides that the draw offers here are pretty big, actually. Our deck is very low on card advantage. We kind of trade 1 for 1 and expect to just win the game because most of our cards are irrelevant to us. Their removal spells don't matter, so they can have a handful of removal. We don't care. And just a lot of their effects don't matter. If they want to draw more cards, whatever. I'll deal with the important ones. So the lack of card advantage isn't a huge boon to us, but that's not the word I wanted. Oh well. Isn't a huge issue to us, but it does get there sometimes. Like, your opponent can overrun you, and that's a bit of an issue, but I will gladly take a couple +1s. For our removal suite, we have 3 copies of Stoning to Death, 3 copies of Dark Purge, and 2 copies of Void Blast. Void Blast is a bit of an interesting card. A lot of people probably aren't super familiar with it, but what it does is remove a creature from play, and it costs 1 in a black less if we control a 0 Mags of Null. So it's a 1 mana removal spell that actually removes the creature from the game if we have 0. This is important because of cards like Gilderai, Arthur, and just various other little interactions like some decks play Dead Man's Prince for various ways to get their creatures back from their graveyard. Dark Purge is easier to cast than Stoning to Death. I kind of mentioned in the mana section of the video that one of the issues the deck has is kind of just a split in the mana base. So turn 2 double black is not easy to get, but we definitely want to have copies of Stoning in the late game. Turn 2 Dark Purge is much easier to cast. So that together is our single target removal suite. We do have another card that's kind of a hybrid between a Wrath and a regular removal spell. We have 2 copies of Endless Night and 2 copies of Dark Pulse as our Wrath effects. Endless Night is kind of a single target kill spell and kind of a Wrath. It kills a creature, then gives all their other creatures -2/-2 until their turn. All creatures in general, not just your opponents, but that's pretty irrelevant. That's 9 times out of 10. It only kills our familiars, which we're more than happy to just sack off at that point. So this card will help, again, shore up the one creature that needs killed weakness of the deck, but also help deal with the overrun. Now, -2/-2 isn't going to clear our opponent's board. That is pretty clear. In conjunction with cards like Zero and Gru's Ballista, though, you can start to clear out a lot of threats. But more importantly, what this card is going to do is kill their biggest threat and then save us between 600 and 800 life. That means that we spent this mana to kill a creature, but we didn't necessarily like lose out on the distance Vlad will create between us and our death. So, in general, you want to make sure you're getting the most efficiency out of your Vlad activations as possible, and you want to do that because, you know, if your opponent has to deal, like, let's say 6,600 damage to end the game rather than 4,000 damage, that's a big difference. And obviously, the way this deck is built, you're going to need to kill your opponent through almost entirely Vlad activations, which means you're likely to be playing the game with more like 70 life. And if your opponent has to deal 7,000, 7,200, something like that, being able to -2/-2 their board and save yourself something like 600 or 800 damage is kind of a huge deal, because that's brought that clock up even higher, which gives us even more time to just Vlad our opponent out. And again, when we get the mana to Vlad them, that means we're going to be gaining more life. Dark Pulse is just insane. It really clears up the night matchup a lot. There would be some incentive to play a third copy, actually, maybe even over one of the Endless Nights, but this is the split that I am testing right now, and I have no complaints. Finally, we have 1 copy of Necronomicon, which I don't know why I didn't put a promo one in here. I have one, and I just realized now that I didn't use that. I just kind of spaced on it when I built this deck. I guess I need to get one of those in. Now I feel stupid. I don't know how the people I was playing with didn't even tell me. Come on, man. Anyway, just 1 copy of this to kind of shore up the late game matchups. If the game goes late, that'll give us infinite removal, infinite counter spells. It hasn't been great in my somewhat limited testing so far, but it seems like a just shoe-in to like include one of the deck in the deck. Like, it just ends the game if you get super late and play it with a graveyard full of counters. Your opponent's low on resources, you're low on resources, but now you have 8 more counter spells or something, and that is pretty insane. So that's Vlad control. It's a bit different from all the Incarnate decks running around, all the Knights decks. It's just a change of pace. It's something different. It's a deck that I really like. My favorite time to play Force of Will was honestly the control meta, when most of the decks were like Scheherazade, Vlad for a little bit after Vingolf, Abdul. Just even the Green Grim decks, just grindy control-based decks with counter spells. You were playing threats, your opponent, and you were fighting over cards instead of just playing cards on the board. And I think that's a lot of fun. I really have fun playing the game this way. I think the biggest weakness in this deck right now is honestly the stone base. You could build the deck a little bit differently so you could really skew your stones in one direction and not have to worry about playing so many of the other ones, but I kind of really want to be playing all these double green and double black cards, so I will stick like this for right now. One of the big upsides of this deck is, like, as long as you don't fall super, super far behind in the early game, it's okay that you didn't play your turn 2 stoning. It's okay that you hit green and your opponent didn't play something that you could Zeeks. You have enough time to kind of make up for it in general that you aren't just going to lose the games to your mana being bad, because, I mean, the worst that could ever possibly happen is that you hit the same color 3 turns in a row. And at that point, you still would be able to cast, like, your Fiat Sinks, you'd be able to cast your Endless Nights, you would be able to cast any Necronomicon, Dark Pulses, any of those kind of cards that you top deck for the rest of the game, or any, Zeke, Succeed, Fiat Sink, those types of cards. It's probably correct, honestly, to move one of these green stones to another black stone, because there are just more double black cards in the deck. But the even split was because of how much I want to cast Familiar of Holy Wind turn 1. And, not sure how correct that is either, but that's what playtesting is for. In theory, I think this is a pretty sound way to go about it, and I think that the deck is pretty strong in the current meta, actually. So I hope you guys like this. If you're interested in more Force of Will, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. We have plenty more Force of Will content coming soon. I do like keeping up with the game and making decks every once in a while, so just keep watching. There will definitely be more Force of Will. If you're in the area, stop out at Top Deck Cards and Games in Bethel Park. We have tournaments every Wednesday and Saturday for Force of Will. And we're really hoping to grow the community at some point. It's a ton of fun, and I hope I can get more people interested in the game. And finally, if you're looking for just cards, check out our website, topdeckcardsandgames.com. There's tons of cards on there. We have a great Forcible selection. And our prices are pretty good. So just make sure you check it out if you're interested. The game's a ton of fun. I know, like, it kind of fell off a little bit because of how annoying the Bahamut metagame was, but I think it's time to really get this game back going again because it's just awesome and it's a ton of fun. So make sure you guys check it out. Keep an open mind. Thanks again for watching, guys.